Hi there. My name is Juji. Welcome to my channel. This is a space for everyone and anyone who's interested in exploring self-development and relationships through the human design system. Well, there's a new Elvis movie out by Baz Luhrmann, and of course I had to watch it. It was great. I highly recommend. It's out on HBO already, even though I think it's still in theaters. And of course, it made me wonder about the relationship between Elvis and Priscilla Presley. Now, there wasn't too much about that in the film because it was mostly focused on him and his manager and their relationship. But I ended up watching like a docu report about the two of them. And I do remember that Elvis and Priscilla were very young when they met. And I looked it up. She was 14 years old and he was 24 when they met in Germany when he was stationed there in the army and she was a colonel's daughter. And their chemistry was apparently undeniable. They were together for 8 years before they got married, and then they were married for most of the rest of his career. They only divorced a few years before his death. According to the film, it was mostly because of his drug use, and their love never really waned. It's just that, it became untenable with the way that he was carrying on. So, of course, I needed to look under the hood, as I like to say, and see what was going on between these two, that they met. And really, like, Elvis was so famous and he was such a sex symbol. He was like sexiest man of the year before that even was a thing. So, he could have had anyone. He could have had another movie star. He could have had another famous person. And even though I guess there was a lot of infidelity between the two of them, he was never seriously linked to anyone else during his career. And of course, he passed away at 42. So, who knows what could have been, but it was really Priscilla who had and kept his attention for most of his life. So let's look at what was going on for them. All right, so this is Elvis. He's a generator. He's a 3-5 profile with a defined solar plexus, so he's an emotional authority. Single definition on the right angle cross of penetration. Ironic, isn't it? So right off the bat, what I want to point out is that as a 3-5 profile, I can see how Elvis really had a very bumpy life, a very bumpy career. He grew up in poverty, and it was partially due to his father's mismanagement of funds. And then he made his father his business manager, which I don't know where the logic was behind that, but clearly for him, it was all about these mistakes that he was making throughout his life. And then the projection field on him, he was a singer in the South who was white, but he was singing Black music and gyrating in a way that wasn't really welcome in the Bible Belt. So there was a lot of projection that he was like singing the devil's music and that he was, bad for, he was just bad, in whatever context that you can put that. So there was a lot of strife already in his life. His mother passed away at a very early age. He was only 22 years old and they were very close. So in order to sort of bypass some of the bad press that he was getting, he enlisted in the army, was stationed in Germany, and that is where he met his future wife, Priscilla Presley, who was only 14 years old at the time. She's a manifesting generator, so they're matched well type for type, also emotional authority, single definition as well, and on the right angle cross of the sleeping phoenix. So, people like that can be very unpredictable. I also want to point out that Elvis was completely left fixed, meaning all of his arrows at the top of his chart are pointing left, and she was all right fixed. So this would seem like they would be at odds with one another, but in fact, there's a purity to being quad left or quad right, as we like to say, that actually is well paired, even though that might be like an unexpected thing. If you are left fixed, you're very strategic and active. And if you're right fixed, you're much more of a sponge of absorption. It's not about learning through memorization. It's just about absorbing the world around you and having it pulled out of you. So, you know, intellectually, who knows how that played out with them, because there was a 10-year age gap between these two. And so you wouldn't think that they would have that much in common. But then you look at the connection chart between the two of them, and you can see they're 8 and 1, have some fun, meaning they have one center open and the rest of them defined, which means that they're really here to enjoy one another, but not get caught up in this ego world of trying to prove anything to one another or really anything to the outside world. And now the electromagnetics, that's what we were really interested in, right? They have 7 electromagnetic connections, and that is very, very unusual. It definitely points to lots of sparks in their relationships. The last time I saw this was with Prince Charles and Camilla, and I was shocked when I saw that in them, and I'm shocked seeing it in them now, in these two now. But honestly, maybe not, because, you know, this is like a love story that stood the test of time. It stood the test of, you know, being really frowned upon in terms of how young she was when they got together. And like I said, Elvis never really seemed to show interest in anybody else, even though he probably could have had anyone. He was such a huge star in his day that I'm sure he had women just like throwing themselves at him, and he only had eyes for Priscilla. So how wonderful. Okay, so what are these electromagnetics? They start with the 4816, the wavelength. This is also something Charles and Camilla share in common. And I'm actually not too surprised. This feels like a couple who is on the same wavelength. They're just really in tune with one another. There's just something about the way that they interact that feels really in sync. Then they have the channel of synthesis, the 4919. This is an emotional connection that they share together. And this is really all about tribal sensitivity, right? So they did have one daughter. I feel like they probably could have made more. And this is all about, you know, making sure that the tribe has everything that it needs. And Elvis was constantly throughout the movie expressing that he wanted more money, more of everything in order to provide for his family. You know, it was not just his immediate family who was benefiting from his fame and fortune. He bought Graceland basically for his mother because, you know, they grew up in very humble circumstances and he wanted to give her a better life. So there was definitely a sense that he was almost overdoing it in a way when it came to the way that he spent on cars, on trips, on all of these things. So like I said, it wasn't just his immediate family who was reaping the rewards of his fame. It was also like everybody that was on his payroll. Like he had a whole posse of people that he was paying a lot of money to, and they were for lack of a better word, like leeching off of him. I mean, I don't feel like he ever interpreted it that way because he did feel responsible for making sure that everybody had a good life. But it was definitely hinted at in the Elvis movie. I don't know if that was for dramatic effect or not, but there was a lot being discussed about how the manager he had from the very beginning of his career was like bleeding him dry and taking 50% or something crazy like that. So there is this tribal sensitivity, very concerned with material, and he always felt like providing came first. And Priscilla was like, actually, I would really like our intimacy to come first. She has channel 59.6, which is a very sensitive, intimate chemistry. And, is nice as it is to have all of these worldly possessions, if you feel like your husband just isn't there, isn't present, isn't being a part of your relationship, I'm sure that took a big toll on the two of them. They also have the electromagnetic 2946, this channel of discovery, which is all about loving life. They were trying to enjoy each other and their family as much as possible. Even with Elvis's grueling schedule, they took time to go on vacations together and enjoy the finer things in life. Maybe they could have done more of that. Honestly, maybe there could have been more exploration and more discovery between the two of them. The film sort of suggested that Elvis really wanted to see the world and that he was prevented from doing so because he was stuck in Vegas in this insane contract that had him performing every single night. And there was just no way that he could leave that and go and tour in like Europe or Asia or any of those places. So that might have been something that could have saved their relationship. Of course, like substance abuse is, nothing to mess with when it comes to breaking up families and stuff like that. So I can see why his demise from the perspective of his family and of the world was that he was so dependent on all of these different things in order to keep going the way that he was going. They also have two electromagnetic connections in the mind, the 6447, which is the abstract mental process, and then the 6124, which is the channel of awareness. And what I say about intellectual connections a lot of the time is that more than likely there was a lot to talk about between the two of them. They weren't a couple that were at a loss for words when it came to how they interact. And in fact, this isn't a very sexy connection, but it is really important when it comes to the way that partnership has longevity, because if you have nothing to say to one another, it doesn't matter how much you enjoy each other's company. If you're just like mute, it probably gets boring. So the fact that there's a lot of conversation between the two of them was something that was talked about in the docuseries, about how they just, he just felt like he could really talk to her. So there's that. And then, of course, we have a bunch of different connections through the 20, 34, and 57, this connection through the individual circuit of the integration channels. And this is really all about individuality. So they remain individuals, but together. And so, like I said in the Charles and Camilla video, where they also have a lot of chemistry in the integration circuit, something that is really attractive to a man who's being put upon by the public, by the management, by the studio executives and everything. It is really, really attractive when somebody allows them to just be themselves. Like in private, they can just let it all hang out. They can just be who they are and not worry about it. Ladies, if you want to know how to seduce a man, let him be himself. Honestly, it is the most seductive thing that I've found when it comes to interpersonal relationships. Because again, even if you're not famous, there is so much being put upon us by the world at large that when somebody totally lets you be your fully expressed self, it is so comforting, such a relief, so attractive. It is. Maybe I'll write a book about the art of seduction, and this can be chapter 1, honestly. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that and that it gave you some insight into why Elvis and Priscilla were such a force to be reckoned with, why their love story seems to be something that people are still pretty preoccupied with many years later. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. You can also find me on Instagram at HDbyZ, and you can find me on my website. The link will be in the show notes. There you'll see that I offer individual human design readings, a relationship mentorship program, and a community for conscious women called the Beehive, where we practice strategy and authority in our everyday lives. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time. Ciao for now.